Alright then, so we've loaded in the Vue library at the top right here, and we also have our own app.js file at the bottom where we're going to start to write our own Vue code. But how do we start doing this exactly? Well, the first step is to create what's known as a Vue instance, and the role of that is to take control of the whole application or just a certain part of the application. Now, in our case, it's going to take control of this element right here and anything inside it. So if we add HTML inside the element, it will take control of that as well. So how do we create this Vue instance exactly? Well, let's go to app.js, and the way we do this is by saying new Vue like so. And the reason we can do this is because we have access to it from this thing right here. All right. So this is going to create a new Vue instance, and it takes an object as a parameter, which will contain some different options about this instance. So one of those options is an L parameter, and this stands for element. And right here is where we say which element we want this Vue instance to control on our web page. Well, we want it to control this thing with an ID of app. So all we need to do inside a string is say hash for the ID and then app. If this was a class, it would be a dot, right? It's just a CSS selector. Okay then. So now we're telling Vue to control this thing right here and anything inside it. But what exactly does that mean? Well, it means that if there's any kind of interactivity, any events or data output that runs through this app div, then it's going to be controlled by this thing right here. So for example, say we had a h2 inside here and we wanted to dynamically output the text of that h2 dependent on the data that we stored inside this Vue instance, then we can do that. So first of all, let us create this h2, so h2, and then we'll leave the inside blank because we're going to output this dynamically. Then what we'll do inside app.js is define another property, and this property is called data. And the data property is an object which contains all the different data to do with this particular instance, right? To do with this thing right here. So if we have some data which is going to store, I don't know, an array of users, or even just a title like we're going to do, we'd store that right in here. So, like I said, we're going to store something called a title, and this will be a string. So we'll create a title that's something like becoming a Vue ninja. Okay, so what we'd like to do is take this thing and output it right here inside the h2. So how do we go about doing that? Well, when we're outputting data inside this template, inside this app, all we need to do is use double curly braces. This is Vue's template syntax. And then whatever we're outputting, we type in here. So Vue is going to look at this and say, okay, I'm taking control of the app. And in here, I see the double curly braces, which means you must want to output some kind of dynamic data stored in my Vue instance. You want to output the title property. So I'll look for that and I can see that it's this string right here. So I'll take that string and I'll dynamically inject it into this h2. All right. So let's save this and let's see if this works. Now, because earlier I told you I had this live server package installed, what I can do is right click on a file and I can go to open with live server. So I'll click that. And then if I open this a little bit, we can see this in a browser over here. So what it does is spin up a local development server, which listens to port 5500 in my case on the local host. And it's served up this index file, which is this. So we can see this title now output to the screen. But how is Vue doing this? If we inspect this element, then we don't see the double curly braces right here. We just see becoming a Vue ninja. So how is it taking those double curly braces and then outputting this data? Well, when Vue runs, it takes control of this element, right? And it turns the template of this element, all the HTML right here, into a JavaScript representation of it. Then it takes any data that's stored on this thing right here, this data object, and it injects it into that JavaScript representation of our template. Once it's done, it converts it back into a HTML template, and it takes that template and renders it to the DOM right here, which is why we don't see the double curly braces anymore. Now, what do you think would happen if we tried to output that data outside of this app? Well, let's give this a whirl. So I'll do title above the app, save it, check it out in a browser, and we just see the title with the double curly braces. So this is not working. And that's because this is sitting outside the scope of what Vue.js is controlling. Remember, we said we just want it to control the app element. So anything outside the app, like this right here, it's not controlling. So it's not looking at this and saying, okay, I'm going to inject dynamic content. It's just looking at this and thinking that's nothing to do with me. Only this is to do with me. Okay? So there's our first Vue instance created, which in a nutshell is controlling the output of this app element.